May 14, 1388, Lake Buir, Mongolia. 50,000 Mongol warriors, descendants of Genghis Khan, prepare for battle. These are the sons and grandsons of the men who conquered half the world, who burned Baghdad, who crushed China, who made Europe tremble. Their empire once stretched from the Pacific Ocean to Eastern Europe, 24 million square kilometers, the largest land empire in human history. Now, they're cornered, fighting not to expand, fighting to survive. Across the lake, 80,000 Ming Chinese soldiers advance, red banners, disciplined formations, new weapons. These aren't the submissive Chinese the Mongols crushed a century ago. These are the descendants of people who endured 100 years of Mongol occupation, who were classified as the lowest class in their own country, who were forbidden to learn Mongolian, carry weapons, or hold government positions. They remember. And they're here for revenge. The Mongol commander Toghus Temür, barely 28 years old, believes this will be another victory. His scouts report the Ming force is small, vulnerable. He doesn't know it's a trap. He doesn't know the Ming general Lan Yu has hidden half his army behind the hills, and he definitely doesn't know this battle will end his empire forever. This is the Battle of Lake Buir, the day the Mongol Empire, invincible for 150 years, was broken, the moment when the greatest conquerors in history became the conquered. How did the heirs of Genghis Khan fall this far? How does an empire that ruled half the world collapse in a single afternoon? Let's find out. To understand how the Mongol Empire fell, you need to understand how impossibly high it rose. 1162. The Mongolian steppes. A boy named Temujin was born into a world of brutal tribal warfare. His childhood was hell. Father poisoned when he was 9. Family abandoned by their clan. Condemned to survive by hunting rats and eating roots. Most kids born into that situation die. Temujin didn't. He learned lessons no prince in a palace could learn: hardness, cunning, relentless determination. By 1206, after decades of war and strategic alliances, Temujin achieved the impossible. He unified all Mongol tribes under his command. In a great assembly, he was proclaimed Genghis Khan, the universal ruler. What followed was the most devastating military campaign the world had ever seen. In just 30 years, the Mongols conquered territory from Korea to Eastern Europe, cities that had stood for centuries, reduced to ash in weeks. Samarkand, 100,000 people, half the population massacred. Merv, 500,000 people. The city essentially ceased to exist. Baghdad, the jewel of the Islamic world, burned for days. World population decreased by approximately 40 million people. How? 3 reasons. First, mobility. Every Mongol warrior had multiple horses. They could cover 160 kilometers in a day when other armies barely managed 30. They didn't carry supplies. They drank horse blood mixed with milk, ate dried meat, traveled light and fast. Second, discipline. Their military organization was revolutionary. Based on decimal system, units of 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, perfect coordination. No communication breakdowns. Third, innovation. They adopted technology from everyone they conquered. Chinese siege engineers, Persian administrators, Russian tactics. They weren't stubborn traditionalists. They were adaptive killers. But their deadliest weapon wasn't military. It was psychological terror. When Mongols approached a city, they sent a simple message: surrender now and live as subjects, or resist, and every man, woman, and child dies. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. They always delivered. Cities that surrendered, occupied but intact. Cities that resisted, erased from the map as warnings to others. It was systematic, calculated, terrifyingly effective. By 1271, Genghis Khan's grandson, Kublai Khan, completed the conquest of China and established the Yuan Dynasty. For the first time in its 3,000-year history, China, the most advanced civilization on Earth, was ruled by foreigners. For the Chinese, this was unprecedented humiliation. They'd survived invasions before, but never complete conquest. Never foreign rule. The Mongols didn't just occupy China. They systematically degraded it. Chinese people were classified in the lowest social category, below even non-Mongol foreigners. Forbidden to learn Mongolian. Forbidden to bear arms. Forbidden from government positions. Their sophisticated civil service system, perfected over centuries, dismantled. Their Confucian values mocked as weakness. This systematic humiliation planted seeds of resentment that would eventually destroy the Mongol Empire. But in 1271, at the peak of their power, the Mongols seemed unstoppable. They'd conquered the unconquerable. Achieved the impossible. What could possibly go wrong? Everything. The Mongol Empire contained the seeds of its own destruction from the beginning. Unlike other civilizations, Mongols never developed a national identity beyond tribal loyalties. Genghis Khan tried. He created laws, the yasa. He established a postal system. He promoted based on merit, not birth. But he also followed an old Mongol tradition dividing territory among his sons. After his death in 1227, the empire fragmented into 4 khanates: the Yuan in China, the Golden Horde in Russia, the Ilkhanate in Persia, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia. At first, these khanates maintained fraternal alliance, cooperated, supported each other, but as generations passed, family ties weakened. Each khanate began following its own path, developed its own interests. Sometimes they even fought each other, the unity that made Mongols invincible, cracking. Meanwhile, in China, the Yuan dynasty faced its own problems. Kublai Khan, brilliant administrator, tried balancing being a Chinese emperor while preserving Mongol identity. His successors lacked his vision. Many were raised in luxurious palaces, never saw the steppes, never learned traditional Mongol survival skills. They became soft, corrupted by Chinese luxury. The administration became inefficient. Taxes increased to finance failed military campaigns against Japan, against Vietnam. Disastrous monetary policies led to runaway inflation, and then nature turned against them. 1340s catastrophic floods of the Yellow River, bubonic plague outbreaks decimated the population. Famine spread. The Chinese people suffered, and they blamed their Mongol rulers. Can an empire survive when it loses the respect of its subjects? History says no. In this context of crisis, a figure emerged who would change everything. Yuanzhang, an orphan peasant. Parents died in famine, found refuge in a Buddhist monastery. When famine destroyed his monastery, Zhu joined a rebel group called the Red Turbans. He had natural military talent, sharp political intelligence. Unlike other rebel leaders who focused on religious mysticism, Zhu understood something crucial. Defeating Mongols required more than passion. It required organization, discipline, strategy. By 1355, Zhu established his base in Nanjing and began building a professional army. While other rebels fought each other, he consolidated territory, trained troops, built administration. He studied Mongol tactics meticulously, learned that despite their ferocity, Mongols had vulnerabilities, a long supply lines, a difficulty with prolonged sieges, a dependence on Chinese administrators. He developed specific counter-tactics, heavy infantry corps that could withstand cavalry charges, disciplined units that wouldn't break formation, and crucially, a political message that resonated: restore Chinese rule, expel the barbarians, return to Confucian order. For scholars marginalized during Yuan rule, this was music to their ears. For peasants crushed by taxes, this was hope. The campaign became a war of attrition. City after city, province after province, Mongols were pushed north. 1368, Zhu's forces took Dadu, present-day Beijing. The last Yuan emperor, Togontemar, fled to Mongolia. Zhu proclaimed himself Emperor Hongwu, founded the Ming Dynasty, the Mongols. Back to the steppes where they started, but they didn't see it as defeat. From their perspective, they were simply regrouping. They'd return, reclaim what was theirs. They established court in Karakoram, Genghis Khan's ancient capital, called themselves the Northern Yuan Dynasty, in their minds, still legitimate rulers of China. Temporarily in exile, reality was different. The once unified Mongol people were now divided into factions. Some tribes recognized Northern Yuan as legitimate leaders. Others followed local Khans. Some even began negotiating with the Ming. Political fragmentation. Economic crisis. During their rule in China, Mongols became dependent on agricultural resources, trade routes, tax revenues, now confined to steppes. Acute economic crisis. Trade routes interrupted, revenues gone. Many Mongols had lost traditional steppe survival skills. Generations raised in Beijing palaces no longer knew how to live like nomadic ancestors. The irony was bitter. The fiercest conquerors in history now struggled to survive. But they hadn't given up. Not yet. While Mongols struggled in the north, Emperor Hongwu transformed China. His first objective: consolidate power. He'd emerged from civil war. New unity was fragile. So he systematically eliminated potential rivals, even former rebellion allies, established internal espionage systems so effective that even powerful ministers feared speaking freely, abolished the position of prime minister, assumed direct control, authoritarian, absolutely, but combined with populist reforms, distributed land to impoverished peasants, reduced taxes for lower classes, built public granaries to prevent famines, promoted return to Confucian values, presented his government as restoration of true Chinese civilization after barbarian occupation. But his most significant reform, military, Hongwu knew Mongols would return. He prepared massive defensive strengthening program. The Great Wall, fallen into disrepair during Yuan era, rebuilt and expanded. System of watchtowers and fire signals along northern border. Ming army reorganized into permanent strategically. Located garrisons, most innovative. Units specialized in fighting Mongols on their own terrain. Light cavalry that could pursue nomads. Mobile artillery that could devastate their concentrations. By 1380, Ming had transformed from rebel force to one of the most sophisticated armies of their time, and their gaze was firmly north. Meanwhile, among Mongols, situation worsened. 1370-80 death of Ayoshiridara. Imperial title passed to his son Toghis Temur. This young Khan, barely 20, faced monumental task: unify fragmented people, revitalize crisis economy, prepare to recover China. Toghis was intelligent, ambitious, but lacked political experience, relied on advisors who prioritized tribal interests over common good, and fatally underestimated Ming transformation under Hongwu. Still, by 1387, Toghis made significant advances through diplomacy, bribes, occasional force, reasserted Yuan authority over many dissident tribes, reorganized army combining traditional Mongol mobility with Chinese infantry tactics, established alliances with Western Turkic peoples. He felt ready for great confrontation. His scouts reported Ming garrisons on northern border weakened by internal conflicts. Emperor Hongwu, now aged, seemed more concerned with palace intrigues than external threats. The opportunity seemed perfect. What Toghis didn't know, he was being manipulated. The apparent weaknesses were an elaborate trap, designed by one of the most brilliant commanders in Chinese history, Lan Yu. Lan Yu had risen from humble origins to become Hongwu's chief military strategist. Unlike traditional Chinese generals who relied on ancient manuals, Lan saw war as pragmatic science, adaptation, deception, innovation. His plan for Mongols was boldy. Instead of purely defensive posture, deliberately leave certain invasion routes open, position seemingly small, vulnerable forces as bait. When Mongols advanced deep into Ming territory, spring the trap with much larger hidden forces. Can we blame Toghis for falling into this? Maybe not. Mongols had conquered half the world by defeating larger armies through superior mobility and tactics. As 1388 began, pieces moved toward inevitable confrontation. Toghis gathered largest Mongol army since Kublai Khan, 50,000 warriors. Lan Yu advanced north with 80,000 soldiers, most hidden to maintain illusion of vulnerability. The stage was set, May 14, 1388. Dawn at Lake Buir. In Mongol camp, Toghis performed traditional rituals. Shamans burned aromatic herbs, offered mare's milk to ancestor spirits, white horse sacrificed, blood spilled to ensure victory. Toghis himself, dressed in blue and black lacquered armor, addressed his generals. Today we recover what is ours by right. Our ancestors conquered the world from these steps. The Chinese think we're weak because they pushed us back. But they forget this land forged Genghis Khan. Here we're not exiles. We're wolves returned to our lair. His words met with traditional clashing of swords on shields. Mongol commanders felt confident. Scout reports indicated Ming army was small, barely 30,000 men, no match for 50,000 experienced warriors. What they didn't know, Lan Yu strategically divided his 80,000 soldiers. The visible force was only vanguard. Bulk of Ming troops advanced by alternative routes, preparing enveloping movement. While Mongols believed they were setting ambush, they were being drawn into trap. 10 kilometers south, Ming camp atmosphere was different. No shamanic rituals, no animal sacrifices. Officers studied detailed terrain maps, reviewed each battle phase meticulously. Lan Yu, 52 years old, severe face marked by campaign scars, personally inspected each unit. The Mongols think they know us, he explained to commanders. They believe we'll fight defensively, fearful of facing them in open field. This will be their fatal mistake. We're not the same Chinese their fathers conquered. We've studied every tactic. Today we eliminate the Mongol threat once and for all. Lan's plan represented revolutionary change in Chinese military strategy. Traditionally, Chinese armies preferred defensive tactics, fortifications, numerical superiority. Lan designed aggressively offensive strategy. Objective, not simply defeat Mongol army, annihilate it completely. 3 key elements. First, vanguard force of heavy infantry with crossbows and primitive gunpowder weapons. Mission: engage Mongols frontally. Keep attention fixed. Second, 2 divisions of heavy cavalry, 15,000 riders each, positioned to attack Mongol flanks at precise moment. These riders wore full armor, something Mongols didn't use. Third, reserve of 10 Zalozan infantry with gunpowder weapons exclusively, primitive arquebuses, fire lances, hand bombs, inaccurate and inefficient, but devastating psychological effect on men and horses unaccustomed to their roar. By mid-morning, armies began deploying on open ground west of Lake Buir, landscape of austere beauty, rolling steppes greening in May, lake shining blue in distance. On any other day, tranquil beauty. Today about to become hell. Initial deployment followed predictable patterns. Mongols adopted classic crescent formation, center slightly weak, tactic perfected by Genghis. Designed to draw enemy into weak center, then wings envelop and destroy. Formation proven effective in hundreds of battles from China to Hungary. Ming formed apparently solid rectangle, infantry in center, small cavalry units on flanks. Traditional Chinese defensive formation. Exactly what Mongols expected. What they couldn't see: Ming heavy cavalry divisions hidden behind hills, nor soldiers with firearms hidden in terrain depression. The trap was set. First move Mongols, 10,000 horse archers detached from main body. Began characteristic tactic, the whirlwind, galloping at full speed in huge circle around Ming formation. Constant rain of arrows seeking to disorganize Chinese lines. Terrifying and beautiful spectacle. Small resistant Mongol horses maintained sustained gallop while riders, standing in stirrups, shot with astonishing precision. Each warrior 6 arrows per minute. 10,000 archers to 1,000 arrows every 10 seconds raining on Chinese lines. But land prepared specific response. Instead of traditional static shield formation rotating system, front ranks knelt with large rectangular shields overlapping. Almost impenetrable wall behind them. Crossbowmen firing in coordinated sequences. Most important, strict discipline. No one breaks formation to pursue attackers. After nearly an hour, Togus recognized tactic wasn't achieving desired effect. Ming casualties minimal. His archers exhausting arrow reserves. Time for next phase. Thunderous drums and horns. Mongol center began advancing. 20,000 riders led by Togus himself. First trot, then gallop. Finally full speed with collective roar shaking earth. Lances gleaming. Silk banners with blue wolf emblem waving. In Ming center, Lan observed with studied calm, waited until Mongols were 400 meters away. Moment when they'd fully committed charge. Couldn't stop or change direction. Then signal, red banner rose 3 times. Immediately, apparently rigid Chinese lines transformed. Solid rectangle split like palace doors. Creating corridor in center. Through corridor advanced Lan's surprise. 5,000 soldiers with gunpowder weapons positioned in 3 staggered lines. Behind them, 2-man teams with small portable cannons. Order pass of fire! What followed was hell Mongols had never experienced. Hundreds of firearms detonated almost simultaneously. Wall of lead fire, shrapnel struck directly against Mongol charge. Effect was catastrophic. First Mongol line fell almost completely. Horses, terrified by roar and gunpowder smell, reared through riders. Togus, riding in second line, suddenly exposed. Stray bullet killed his horse. Khan fell heavily. Personal guards immediately surrounded him. Human shield while providing new mount. Critical moment when Lan launched second phase. Ming heavy cavalry divisions hidden until now emerged on Mongol flanks. 30,000 riders total, each in full armor. Armed with nearly 4-meter steel lances. Mongols, already disorganized by frontal attack, suddenly attacked from 3 directions. Their wings that should have enveloped enemy. Themselves enveloped. On Mongol right wing, veteran General Kutuktai tried reorganizing his men. Formed defensive circle, archers in center, lancers on perimeter. For nearly an hour, formation heroically resisted repeated Ming charges, but numbers were against them. For every Mongol, almost 2 Ming soldiers. Worse, Ming had fresh supplies arriving continuously. Mongols isolated with limited resources. Eventually, defensive circle broke. Kutuktai, who'd ridden with Togus's father, participated in dozens of battles, died with Ming lance piercing his throat. His last orders: small group of riders break through to Khan. Help him escape. In center, Togus's situation desperate. Personal guard reduced from 300 to less than 50. 3 horses killed under him. Arrow pierced left shoulder. Sword cut left face bloodied. Still, young Khan fought with ancestral courage. Every sword swing, he remembered childhood stories. How great-grandfather Kublai conquered China. How Genghis unified steppes. He couldn't be the one to end that legacy. But even courage has limits. When riders sent by Kutuktai reached him, closest advisors implored, abandon the field. Living Khan can gather new army. Dead Khan only serves as Ming trophy. With broken heart, Togus finally accepted inevitable. Together with approximately 200 warriors, he managed breaking through weak Ming encirclement point, rode north into Mongolia depths. Behind him shattered army of 50,000 Mongols who began battle. More than 30,000 lay dead or dying. Another 10,000 captured. Only few thousand in small scattered groups escaped. Ming losses significantly lower, known 8,000 dead, 12,000 wounded. For Lan Yu, acceptable price for definitive victory. As sun set over Lake Buir, dying waters red, Lan Yu toward battlefield. Bodies of men and horses stretched as far as eye could see. Once proud Mongol banners trampled in mud, broken weapons. Shattered shields, dented helmets. Mute witnesses to combat ferocity. Lan wasn't man given to philosophical reflection. For him, war was simply means to achieve political objectives. Yet even he felt historical weight. "Thus ends an empire," he murmured to officer. Not with shout but with whisper. That night in his tent, he drafted report to Emperor Hongwu. Concise, technical, numbers, tactics, results. Only in final paragraph, more personal comment: "Your Majesty, today we avenged century of humiliation. Mongol military power broken in way I consider irreparable. Best generals dead. Bravest warriors fallen. Khan flees north with handful of followers. Yuan Dynasty once ruled from Pacific to Europe, now nothing but memory. China can finally breathe easy. What Lan couldn't know. His victory even more complete than he imagined. Mongol Empire, already fragmenting before battle, would now disintegrate completely. Tribes without cohesion from strong central leadership would return to ancient rivalries. Sophisticated imperial administration built by Genghis's descendants. Collapse in years. Toghus Temür, last Khan with true imperial aspirations, assassinated by internal rivals just 3 years later. His death marked definitive end of any serious attempt to rebuild Genghis's empire. Era of Mongols as dominant force in Asia over. New order led by Ming Dynasty beginning. Weeks following battle witnessed relentless pursuit. Lan Yu, determined to eradicate any possibility of Mongol resurgence, divided army into smaller units spreading across steppes like dragnet. Ming forces operated with brutal precision. Any Mongol group larger than 100 warriors attacked immediately, nomadic settlements resisting surrender. Raised, women and children sent south as slaves. Toghus meanwhile fled ever farther north, toward territories forming part of Siberia today. Each passing day his entourage diminished, some warriors deserted. Others fell to Ming ambushes. Simple exhaustion. By autumn 1388, once powerful Khan traveled with barely 50 loyal followers. History becomes blurred here, different sources offering contradictory versions. Ming records claim their forces eventually caught and killed Toghus near Kerulan River. Later Mongol chronicles suggest he escaped, established small khanate in far north where he lived several years before being betrayed by relative. What's indisputable by 1390, centralized Mongol power completely disappeared. What remained of once glorious empire? Dozens of small tribal confederations, each fighting for survival. Northern Yuan Dynasty, kept alive fiction of being legitimate rulers of China, disintegrated into internal struggles. Different Mongol royal family members established rival claims to title. None had resources or support to make them effective. By 1400, title of Great Khan practically ceremonial, no real power. In contrast, Ming Dynasty entered Golden Age. Emperor Hongwu validated by decisive victory, consolidated reforms transforming China into global power. His son Mongol Emperor would expand influence further. Sponsored famous naval expeditions of Zhang He, carrying Ming flag as far as East Africa. China completed extraordinary historical cycle, from being conquered by northern barbarians to once again becoming preeminent empire of East Asia. What happened to the people who once made world tremble? Fall was as spectacular as rise had been meteoric. In barely 2 generations, from rulers of largest land empire in history to scattered nomadic tribes struggling for survival in harsh steppes. Several factors explain catastrophic collapse. First, no national identity beyond tribal loyalties. Unlike China, maintaining cultural and political continuity through centuries, Mongols remained fundamentally tribal. When central leadership weakened, tribal divisions resurfaced with force. Second, precarious economic base. True Mongol strength, military mobility, not production of goods. They depended on trade and tribute from sedentary peoples. Once they lost access to these resources, severe economic crisis. Third, profound identity crisis. Generations born during imperial peak abandoned many traditions and skills that made ancestors formidable. Not fully sedentary like Chinese, but neither fully maintaining traditional nomadic life. This manifested particularly among Mongol elite, descendants of Genghis, educated in palaces surrounded by luxuries, Chinese and Persian tutors teaching philosophy, mathematics, literature. When expelled to steppes, many lacked basic survival skills every traditional nomadic child learned. Anonymous Mongol poem from the time captures this loss. Our ancestors rode from 4 winds. Their bows sang song of conquest, we their children forgot language of wind, and our bows hang silent in empty yurts. What are we now? Neither Khans nor nomads, the steppe calls us, but we no longer know how to listen. For common Mongol people, transition less traumatic. Many simply return to old ways, nomadic herding, hunting, occasional raids. Life in steppes, hard but familiar, continued as it had for millennia before Genghis. But for former imperial elite, fall devastating. Many fell into depression, alcoholism, Others tried maintaining miniature imperial courts, pale imitations of past glory. Some adopted Buddhism as way to escape present pain, retreated to makeshift monasteries. Particularly tragic cultural loss. During imperial peak, Mongols were great patrons of arts and sciences. Kublai Khan's court attracted scholars from entire known world. Imperial postal system facilitated unprecedented exchange of ideas across Eurasia. With empire collapse, cultural flourishing ended abruptly. Libraries destroyed or abandoned. Administrative systems crumbled. Knowledge accumulated over generations lost in single generation. Battle of Lake Buir thus represents much more than military defeat. Symbolizes end of unique historical experiment. Attempt of nomadic people to create global empire without completely abandoning traditional identity. In contemporary terms, clash between two civilization models. Sedentary agricultural model of China, based on stability, hierarchy, continuity. Pastoral nomadic model of Mongolia, based on mobility, adaptability, expansion. For brief but extraordinary period, nomads dominated, but long run. Sedentary model proved more sustainable. Lake Buir marked definitive turning point in this civilizational confrontation. For Ming, victory represented not only military triumph, but ideological validation. Their worldview, China as Middle Kingdom, nomadic peoples as marginal barbarians, seemed confirmed by events. This Sinocentric vision would dominate Chinese foreign policy for next 5 centuries. Could history have taken different course? What if Mongols won at Lake Buir? Fascinating question for counterfactual history. Mongol victory probably would have resulted in new incursions into China, possibly reconquest of parts of north, but doubtful they could have fully rebuilt previous dominion. By 1388, China under Ming, already much more cohesive and militarily capable than Song state Mongols originally conquered. Most likely victory would have given Mongols few more decades of relevance as regional power, but wouldn't have reversed general trend of imperial decline. Antogast Tema. Did last Khan really try restoring empire glory? Ultimate fate remains one of great mysteries of Asian history. Some Mongol oral traditions suggest he found refuge among Western Turkic peoples, lived incognito until natural death. Others claim assassinated by Ming agents disguised as merchants. Official Ming records insist he was captured and executed. Most poetic version, though historically dubious, from 15th century account, Togas abandoned all imperial pretension. Spent final years as simple shepherd tending small flock in remote Altai mountains. Only on deathbed revealed true identity to children. Advised them, power is like wind of steppe. It lifts you high, but eventually abandons you. Only land remains constant. Whatever truth about his personal end of his dynasty undeniable. With defeat at Lake Buir, Yuan dynasty joined long list of empires that rose meteorically, shone intensely, then faded into darkness. As 14th century ended, world was very different from one Genghis Khan knew. System of Mongol Khanates, once dominating from Korea to Hungary, collapsed into unrecognizable fragments. Trade routes flourishing under Mongol Pax were interrupted. China, after century as province of nomadic empire, reclaimed traditional place as dominant civilization of East Asia. For China, Mongol experience left contradictory legacy. On one hand, Mongol century remembered as era of national humiliation. Collective trauma reinforcing xenophobic and isolationist tendencies in Chinese political culture. Ming Dynasty, born in rebellion against Yuan, institutionalized policies limiting contact with foreign barbarians. Glorified idealized version of traditional Han culture. On other hand, China emerged transformed. Centralized administrative system Yuan implemented, largely maintained by Ming. Definitive territorial integration, incorporation of regions like Yunnan and Tibet into Chinese sphere. Direct legacy of Mongol unification. And although Chinese strove erasing barbarian cultural influences, elements like musical instruments, artistic styles, Mongol linguistic terms remained intertwined in Chinese cultural fabric. For Mongols themselves fall from imperial heights had lasting consequences. After empire fragmentation, tribes returned to traditional patterns of internal conflict and shifting alliances. Unable to seriously threaten China again, became pawns in larger geopolitical game between China and later Russia. During Qing dynasty, Manchus employed sophisticated divide and conquer strategies keeping Mongols fragmented and subordinated. Religion also played crucial role. Tibetan Buddhism, actively promoted by Qing, provided Mongols with new cultural identity, gradually displacing ancient shamanic traditions and warrior ethos. By time Mongolia declared independence in 1911 following Qing collapse, little remained of imperial spirit animating Genghis's hordes. Modern Mongolia, although proud of historical heritage, is a nation of barely 3 million people, mostly urbanized. seeking place in world dominated by two huge neighbors, Russia and China. Historical irony, people who once created largest land empire in history now inhabit one of world's least densely populated countries, trapped between two powers. So what can we learn from this extraordinary saga of rise and fall? First lesson: military power alone never enough to sustain empire. Mongols conquered with tactical brilliance, but governed with administrative systems borrowed from civilizations they subdued. When these systems collapsed, no native structures to replace them. Second, importance of cultural adaptability. Early Mongol leaders showed extraordinary openness to foreign ideas, adopted best from each conquered civilization, but eventually fell into common empire trap, dilemma between assimilation and cultural preservation. Trying to maintain nomadic identity while ruling sedentary populations created unsustainable contradictions. Third, danger of internal divisions. Mongol system of dividing territory among heirs, appropriate for limited-scale nomadic society, proved disastrous when applied to transcontinental empire. Family and tribal rivalries, momentarily suppressed during imperial rise, resurfaced with destructive force during decline. Fourth, all empires eventually face limits of expansion. For Mongols, Lake Buir represents point where advantages giving them supremacy, mobility, warrior ferocity, tactical innovation, finally overcome by inherent disadvantages, low population density, precarious economic base, fragile political cohesion. Finally, cyclical nature of power. In barely 2 centuries, Mongols went from marginal people on civilization's periphery to dominating much of known world, then returning to marginality. Humbling reminder: even most powerful empires are, on historical timescale, relatively brief phenomena. Historian Arnold Toynbee once said, "Empires are mostly doomed to follow an inexorable cycle of growth, maturity, decline, and death." Mongols were no exception. Their singularity, extraordinary speed and drama with which they traversed this cycle. Yet despite catastrophic political collapse, Mongol impact on world history continues resonating. Perhaps most significant aspect, creation of first truly intercontinental exchange system. Under Mongol Pax, merchants, missionaries, artists, scientists could travel with relative safety across vast distances. Ideas, technologies, products previously confined to specific regions began circulating freely. Gunpowder, invented in China, reached Europe through Mongol routes. Agricultural techniques from Persia introduced to China. Mathematical advances from India and Islamic world spread east and west. This medieval globalization accelerated technological and scientific development throughout Eurasia, laid foundations for later transformations. Marco Polo, whose descriptions fascinated Europe, only able to make extraordinary journey thanks to stability Mongol dominion created. His accounts opened European minds to existence of advanced civilizations beyond known borders. Ironically, while their empire fragmented, genetic impact consolidated. Modern genetic studies show approximately 8% of men in territories once forming Mongol Empire carry same Y chromosome haplogroup, possibly derived from Genghis Khan and direct descendants. Perhaps most dramatic example of genetic impact attributable to single lineage in human history. Today, peaceful waters of Lake Buir reflect sky and clouds. 637 years have passed since that fateful battle. Nothing indicates this tranquil spot on Mongolia-China border witnessed Asia's fate being decided. Yet if you listen carefully to wind blowing over steppes, perhaps you can hear distant echo of 50,000 Mongol warriors believing they'd reclaim their empire. Echo of 80,000 Ming soldiers determined to end Mongol threat forever. Echo of Togas Tema, last Khan with imperial dreams, fleeing into northern darkness. Echo of Lan Yu, brilliant general who broke what seemed unbreakable. The Mongol Empire as political entity vanished centuries ago, yet its legacy transcends mere military conquests. It permanently transformed cultural, political, genetic landscape of Eurasia. For a brief moment in history, nomadic people from harsh steppes of Mongolia proved that empires aren't built only by settled civilizations. They showed that mobility, adaptability, innovation can overcome numerical disadvantages. They demonstrated that leadership transcends birth or education, can emerge from harshest circumstances. But they also showed that empires built purely on military conquest, without sustainable economic base, without cultural cohesion, without administrative continuity, are inherently fragile. The Battle of Lake Buir represents a moment when these realities collided, when advantages that made Mongols supreme finally met their limits, when conquered people, patient, organized, determined, rose up and took back their destiny. It's a story of how greatest conquerors became conquered, how largest empire fell, how legacy of Genghis Khan was broken forever. But it's also a reminder all power is temporary, all glory is fleeting. All empires, no matter how mighty, are ultimately just one more chapter in endless story of humanity. The steppes of Mongolia still exist. The people still live there. But the empire that once made world tremble, gone, like wind across the grass. And on a quiet shore of Lake Buir, if you know where to look, you can still find fragments, rusted armor, broken arrowheads, bones bleached white by centuries, silent witnesses to the day an empire died.